Okay, let's talk about polarity and tetrahedral molecules. Now, three-way tug-of-wars are kind of easy to understand, that there can be no winner. You can have a three-way tug-of-war where no one wins. Well, actually, you can have a four-way tug-of-war where no one wins. One of those is a situation where it's all completely flat, 90 degrees, all at the corners of a room. However, a tetrahedral structure also will produce no winner if, in fact, each of the molecules on the outside are exactly the same, have the same electronegativity. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you had carbon tetrafluoride, CF4. Now it looks like you've got one fluorine pulling up and there's nothing pulling straight down to cancel that out. However, these three fluorines are all pulling slightly down together. This fluorine's pulling a little bit out and a little bit down. This fluorine is pulling a little bit out and a little bit down. This fluorine is pulling a little bit out and a little bit down. Those three pulling down together will produce a downward arrow for those, they'll call it dipole moment, the way you pull on those electrons. That's going to cancel the upward pull on that fluorine. And then the little bit out of this fluorine and the little bit out of that fluorine will cancel out the little bit out of that fluorine. All of those outward vectors, if I use that word, outward arrows, are going to cancel out. So in fact, if you have tetrahedral structures where everything is the same on the outside, it's going to be non-polar. And by the time you finish these videos, you're going to notice that I'm going to say this all the time. If you take one of your base geometries, trigonal planar, tetrahedral, trigonal bipyramidal, and octahedral, if you take your base geometry and you put exactly the same atoms on the outside, all of your base geometries are nonpolar. Always. They will all cancel out. They're going to be symmetric, even if tetrahedral doesn't quite look symmetric. Okay? Now, what if we start adding lone pairs to this situation? So let's take a situation where we have a tetrahedral geometry, but one of them is a lone pair right here. So that gives us a pyramidal structure. Now, all we have is a pull in one direction, a pull in another, and a pull in another. Those are not going to cancel each other out. We really needed this fourth one on top to cancel the downward pulls of the ones that I drew below. So we have one lone pair. It can't be symmetric. Symmetry, symmetric is nonpolar. This is not symmetric. There's nothing to cancel out that lone pair. Since it's not symmetric, it won't all cancel out. That case, there will be a winner. The electrons will be pulled in one particular direction, and it's going to be polar. Anytime you have a single lone pair, it's always polar. Now, what about two lone pairs? Okay, let's do a bent structure. I'm going to put a lone pair ghost here. I'm going to put a lone pair right here. This does not cancel that. That's not symmetrical. They're not directly opposed to one another. So since this is not a symmetrical molecule, this pull is not the same as that pull. This pull does not directly opposite that pull. There will be a winner. So since there's a winner, we're going to call that a polar molecule. So for tetrahedral structures, if everything is the same on the outside, nonpolar. However, if we're not symmetrical, if we have either one lone pair or two on this particular structure, it's not symmetrical, it will be polar. Also watch out for tetrahedral structures where not every atom is the same. So if you have a tetrahedral structure where every single atom is exactly the same, great. It's going to be non-polar. Perfect. However, if two of those atoms are different than the other two, so that's what I kind of drew here. Let's say you have two H's and two F's on, let's say, a carbon. 4 domains total. Well, it's not symmetric. This fluorine does not cancel that fluorine. To cancel, they would need to be directly opposite one another. So electrons will get pulled in one direction. If there is a pull, it's going to be polar. And notice, this is not all symmetrical. There is no symmetry here. So nonpolar, symmetric, polar is non-symmetric. Okay, next video, I'm going to go through trigonal bipyramidal structures.